Hey everyone, welcome to this video where we are going to talk about the Okteto Manifest. The Okteto Manifest acts as a single place where you can define how your dev environments should look like. Before we discuss how you can write an Okteto Manifest for your applications, let's ask ourselves why we need this manifest-driven approach. In my opinion, this manifest-driven approach gives you two benefits. One, it ensures standardization. That means as platform engineers, you can be sure that all your developers' environments are just like you want them to be, which means there are no hidden surprises and they are configured exactly the way you want them to be. They are compliant with all the policies you have. They're using the right images, right tags and everything. All of that is standardized across your entire development team. The second big benefit is repeatability. When you ensure that all your dev environments are powered by a defined manifest, you're making sure that all the environments are reproducible easily. And that means it is easy to replicate any issues you might have when developing because you are ensuring that all the dev environments are the same. So any issue which can be replicated on one dev environment would be easy to replicate on the other one as well. Other than that, you get all the benefits of a declarative approach, which means you can just define this and leave the task of creating the dev environment to Okteto and just describing the final state of your dev environment is in this manifest. You can also store this manifest in a version control system like Git, and that would mean you are able to keep a track of how your dev environment has evolved over time. And if something breaks, you can easily revert a commit and everything would be back to how it was. So now that you understand the value of having a manifest-driven approach to your dev environments, let me go to my code editor and show you how you can write this Okteto manifest to easily spin up dev environments for your applications. Usually your Okteto manifest will be specific to one particular application and would have instructions on how to deploy and develop all the microservices which make up that application. Now there are special cases where you can reference the manifest of another application if one application is a dependency of the other application, but we won't be going into that in this video. If you want to learn more about that, I'll include a link to our docs which explains more about that. So coming back to my original point, you'll have a manifest which is specific to your application and that will have instructions on how to deploy the dev environment for this particular application. It is very common to keep this manifest in the same repository as your application so that all your developers need to do to spin up is just clone this environment and run Okteto up. You can also configure the Okteto catalog to read this manifest and allow developers to create their environments from the Okteto UI, but we have a separate video for that, so check that out if you're interested in it. So understanding the Okteto manifest becomes very easy if you break it down into the three sections which build it up. The first is the build section, which defines how your container images would get built. So essentially when you launch a dev environment with Okteto, what you're doing is deploying your application microservices on a Kubernetes cluster. Now you know that to deploy these microservices you need a container image, right? Which would be running all the containers inside the pods. But we want to build this image from the latest code which is there in our repository at the time we clone it. And that is why we have the build section. The build section is where you list down what Docker file you want to use to build the image for each microservice. So if you see here, this application has two microservices, the server and the client. For both of them, I specify the context key and point to the folder where my Docker file is. So if we open the structure here, you'll see that inside the server folder, I have my Docker file. So I simply tell Okteto that the context for the client microservice is the client folder. With me so far? The next section is the deploy section, and this is where we tell Okteto how to deploy each of the individual microservices. So in our case, our application has a front end, a back end, and a database. For all of these, I'm using a Helm chart, but what the deploy section basically does is it runs the commands inside a container. So you can run any commands you want to, and you can use any tool you want to. So you could use customize or anything else like normal Kubernetes YAMLs if you're using those, but you have the complete independence of choosing the tools you want to and using your manifests in the exact way they are in production and deploying them during development for your dev environments. So here you'll see that for the database deployment, I just use the DB chart, which is inside the DB directory. But what you'll notice is that for the front end and the back end, I am using the charts, but I'm replacing the image used in those charts with the image we built in the first step. So the way to do that is just to use Okteto build and the name of the microservice combined with the word image. So these are special variables which Okteto injects and allows you to leverage from, and they allow you to use the images which you have already built in the previous step during the deploy phase. And this is how we ensure that when a developer spins up an environment, they are deploying an environment which has the latest code instead of relying on an image release which might have been done a month or so ago. The final section is the dev section, and this is where you define how you want your dev containers to look like. So what happens is that when developers do Okteto up, the deployed applications containers are replaced with dev containers, and these have all the dev tools your developers might need. And this section basically allows you to define what images you want to use for your dev container, what command you want initially running when someone connects to the dev container, and what folders you want to synchronize from your local machine to the code which is running in the container. So if you look here, I have the same bash command defined for the client service as well, but I could change this to something like npm start if I want that as soon as my developers run Okteto up, they are able to see their application live and hot reload their changes since it's a React app. And finally, I specify what folder I want to synchronize from my local machine to the dev container, and this is based on where my microservices code is based on the local machine. So I know that for the server microservice, the code is in the server folder, and then this is the folder where I know that the code is inside the container, and this depends on the Docker file. So if you see in the Docker file for this service, we set app as the working directory, which means we want to synchronize the code to this app directory from our local machine. This is how you can easily define a simple Okteto manifest for your applications and get your developers up and running with their dev environments. But there is a lot more to the Okteto manifest, and we only touch the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the things you can configure. You can define any external resources your application might need, and these could be things like storage buckets or databases that your application needs to run. And you can also define docs which your application developers might need. So instead of them having to run around between GitHub pages, Confluence, and all that, you can have all that information aggregated in one place. If you're interested in learning more about this feature, we already have a video on that, which I'll link, so you should check that out as well. So go to our documentation to see what all you can define on the Okteto manifest, and I really hope this video enables you to build great development experiences for your team, all defined and consolidated in one single manifest file. If you found this video useful and want to learn more about our product, go to okteto.com and you can get a free trial there, or you can even book a demo call with us. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.